Well, as we do await the outcome of today's National Cabinet meeting in Brisbane and the news conference, which should be coming up a bit later this hour, let's bring in the President of the Australian Local Government Association, Linda Scott, who also serves on the City of Sydney Council. Linda, really appreciate your time. Thank you. Firstly, I'd like you to just set the scene for us if you can. How tight is the housing market in your local area of Sydney? Obviously one of the country's hotspots in terms of demand, and how have you watched that crisis develop in recent times?
Well, just last week, I met with my residents in Pyrmont to talk about how we would try to work with them to facilitate the 4,000 new dwellings that the New South Wales Government has asked us to consider in that area. And we know now for many years, particularly in our capital cities like Sydney, we've seen a housing crisis really build. It certainly is the case, though, that around the country, Australia's 537 local governments are united in our calls for the need for better coordination amongst all levels of government to solve this very significant issue. Whilst it might look different in remote parts of the Northern Territory to what the housing crisis looks like in my home, the City of Sydney, it is the case that without all levels of government working together with our different responsibilities, this is going to remain a significant challenge. Local governments face skill shortages with planners and engineers. We face the need to share innovations and ideas, and we've called on today's National Cabinet to consider funding for local government, indeed at least $100 million per year, to support our calls for better delivery of housing across Australia.
So, Linda, just looking at a couple of the ideas on the table, a rent freeze is one of them that's being pushed by the Greens. It looks like something that the Prime Minister is not going to go for today. Would that actually be helpful in your area? And what other support for renters would you like to see in terms of things that would actually make a real difference?
Look, we know that in many parts of Australia at the moment, it certainly is difficult to be a person who is renting. And we've also seen, unfortunately, in many parts of Australia, increasing numbers of people sleeping rough. These are terrible statistics that we don't want to see carry forward. Local governments, whilst we don't have jurisdiction for rental reforms and rental rights, certainly want to ensure that we're working with state and territory and Commonwealth governments to allow there to be enough housing around Australia. What does that mean? It means we need to have appropriate supply in the right areas. It also means that when local governments approve new housing, we have confidence that it's going to continue. We know, for example, in Queensland, local governments there last year approved a significant number of new dwellings, but they weren't built because we've seen a number, unfortunately, of construction firms collapse. We've seen the pipeline of materials really pressed by inflationary pressures. So there are a really complex set of different barriers that are getting in the way of Australia delivering enough homes for all the people that want to live here. And we only can resolve this by ensuring that Commonwealth, state and territory and local governments work better together into the future.
We also hear a lot about the need for land releases. How big a piece or small piece of the puzzle do you see that as in terms of coming to fixing the supply problem?
It is really important. We have to ensure that when new land is released, it's land that is able to be developed. Often councils find themselves in very difficult positions where we've had land that's been zoned historically for housing, but we now know it's at significant flood risk. By approving housing, we face the risk of building new homes that are uninsurable, that really are almost unlivable. So we absolutely have called on the Commonwealth Government to discuss today a climate resilience lens to our planning system. Local governments across the country are the front line when it comes to disasters and recovery, and we want to make sure that we're not designing our towns and cities and regions of the future without considering the changes to our climate and without ensuring that the homes that we zone for are actually able to be built, are able to be insured, and that people can live in communities. The other critical factor, of course, is also to ensure there's enough local infrastructure. We've seen, unfortunately, in Australia, a history of housing development that's not connected to enough drainage, that doesn't, of course, have the footpaths, the bike paths, the roads, the libraries, and those other really critical parts of local infrastructure that make a place livable. Again, this is a very complex problem. If it was easy, we would have solved it by now, but only working together with all the powers of Australia's Commonwealth states and territories and local governments can we actually come up with place-based solutions for these problems. At local governments, we know our communities well, and we can really create the best place-based solutions for where new housing can go, where existing places may be able to handle some more homes, and ensure at the same time the services and the infrastructure are there to support all those communities.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet, but hopefully in 20 or so minutes when we hear from the Prime Minister, we'll get some firm ideas that have been agreed on at that National Cabinet to try to start to fix the problem. Linda Scott, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.